What's going on, everybody? Welcome back into the SFS channel. My name's Gavin, and we are fresh off of finishing up Week 10 fantasy football, or at least the Sunday slate of games. I'm fresh off of recording the early waiver wire pickup segment as well, so if you're looking for some of that information, make sure to check that out if you haven't done so already after you watch this episode. But in this video, what I'm going to be doing is taking some of my 10 biggest takeaways from Week 10 action, synthesizing all that information up for you all, and pushing it out towards you here as we move towards Week 11. So I'll basically just be talking through 10 of the things I noticed that I thought were important as it relates to fantasy stock, value analysis, all that great stuff here moving forward this season. So as always, if you're new around here, smash the subscribe button. We'd love to have you. We're trying to grow the community and help as many players on a weekly basis as possible, or as we possibly can here. So of course, take part in that. Like today's episode before we get started, and let's dive right on in. All right, I know I can be very excitable after these Sunday games get finished up and you get rather long-winded with some of my takes, so I'll do my best to stay efficient for you all on a Monday morning here, Sunday night as I record this. Rachaad White kicking it off with our first takeaway from Week 10. So this is going to be the Munich game, the Sunday morning contest that we watched or potentially didn't watch if you decided to sleep in. I don't blame you. I was able to catch this game. Surprisingly, I thought I was going to get screwed over and have to buy ESPN Plus or something like we did have to a couple weeks back. But much to my surprise, YouTube TV offered this game. Again, this is just random spewing of nonsense here. But Rachaad White, my takeaway here is that his role is growing. So, of course, the overall overarching takeaway is that Leonard Fournette's status could be in question for Week 12. He did exit late in the fourth quarter with a hip injury. That's problematic. That's unfortunate. We hate to see that for Lenny's health here. But overall, with all that stuff aside, I still feel comfortable and confident saying Rachaad White's role in this offense is growing, and therefore his fantasy stock is rising. We heard the reports last week, and I mentioned them in one of the episodes, maybe multiple of them, that a beat reporter for Tampa Bay had suggested the fact that Rachaad White could take over this backfield. Now, he did have 22 rushing attempts for 105 yards. That is important. As his role expands and his usage increases here, that case is more and more true as the days go by. Now, I'm still not ready to assert him as the starter here, but that is very interesting because I was reluctant to really raise my valuation of Rachaad White. Like, I certainly placed a push upon him in terms of my overall thoughts regarding him in fantasy, and I loved what I had seen on tape from him to this point in the year. He's really getting the job done now with A, the opportunities being there, and B, he's continuing to deliver. So keep your eye on Rachaad White. Definitely someone worth potentially acquiring off the waiver wire, especially if you are a Fournette owner as this team heads into the bye next week. So again, we'll see them in Week 12. However, it is, again, something to think about. I believe they have Cleveland in that Week 12 matchup. Isaiah Pacheco, number 2 here. Pacheco has definitely secured the lead running back role for this team, at least as far as the ground game is concerned. Now, the reason I say that he has for sure done so is Andy Reid's backfield situation can change like that. However, I'm very comfortable seeing what we saw here this past week. Now, the production wasn't great. He had only 6 points or so in half PPR or any PPR format because he lost a fumble early in this game. But he did have 16 rushes for 82 yards on the ground. And what's really important about that to me is the fact that he lost an early fumble in this game and they continued to show confidence in him moving forward. So we're a couple of weeks removed now from Andy Reid officially declaring him the starting and lead back for this team. But after seeing CEH and Jerick McKinnon combined for just 1 rushing attempt, that to me is now more affirmed than it has been at any point in this season. And I definitely like Pacheco as a lower end running back too on my rosters. If you were to stash him here, another potential waiver wire pickup for this week. But again, that opportunity is very telling, especially after a blunder that most coaches just can't bear to put a guy back out on the field, especially if it's such a short leash as you would assume it would be for this Kansas City backfield committee. Cooper Kupp here representing the Rams offense and the fact that their fantasy relevance this season may be as good as gone. Very unfortunate stuff. So late in the game, I think they were down 17 points. John Wolford, the second time that Sean McVay has really had just an absolute blunder that has resulted in the Cooper Kupp injury. You had the screen pass down multiple scores earlier on this season. And then I'm pretty sure they were down 17 at this point in time. I saw the injury on Red Zone, but What happened essentially was Wolford threw him a pass in the left sideline, and a guy straight up landed on his leg. I thought it was a knee issue at first. Then he grabs for his ankle region. They're classifying it as a simple leg injury. When I'm recording this podcast episode, I don't know what it is exactly. All we know is that after the game, Sean McVay says, looks bad, doesn't sound good. Uh-oh, so you don't have Matt Stafford, who's in concussion protocol. I've already outlined my skepticisms about potential other lingering issues causing him troubles here, in addition to said mystery concussion, as well as the fact that if Cooper Kupp is on the field, this offense is going to be in utter turmoil. They no longer support fantasy-relevant running backs. Allen Robinson is the only hope that you could have as the wide receiver one in this offense, and even then, he has not consistently won vertically this season in terms of his route participation, and this offense just doesn't have the firepower. If you put a number one corner on Allen Robinson, I mean, things might not turn out as good as I expected them to. If you asked me 3 months ago in August, or whatever 3 months ago is, 4 months ago, let's just say that to put us back in the summertime for sure, things look terrible in this Rams offense right now. And again, if you remove the best player, Cooper Kupp, or potentially their two best players, things could be insanely bad for this overall offensive attack. And basically everyone, I think, is a loser in this situation. It's not like I'm expecting Ben Skoranek to step up to the plate and increase his value to be a weekly lineup starter. If it's anyone, it's Allen Robinson. And even then, that seems like a long shot after what we've seen this season. D'Onta Foreman, let's talk some Carolina Panthers here very briefly, going back to Thursday Night Football. I don't know, I didn't just talk about this first. That's what we usually do here, but I've already talked about this in a previous week. This was a takeaway I had again, though, after seeing the blowout. The Panthers just get absolutely housed the week prior against Cincinnati. They have an offensive identity, and if you take it away from them, it's going to be very tough sledding, and it's going to be a shaky and rocky road for them. But what they do have is a physical ground and pound mentality that when D'Onta Foreman is on the football field, they're going to wedge the football down your throat and continually run inside, or in between the tackles, I should just say. And they're going to, again, play big boy physical football. And that's exactly what D'Onta Foreman does well. And he's been very efficient. And I really love cheering for the guy. He's been super humble. If you watch the post-game presser against Atlanta this past Thursday, which why would you? So you probably didn't. He basically gave all the credit for the entire game to his offensive line. And teammates love that stuff. They're going to rally around that. And this isn't, obviously an analytical fantasy approach that I'm taking right here, but if they continue to just play smash mouth football and get the ball on the ground to this guy, he's going to continue putting up RB2 numbers. He has had 300-yard games in 4 tries since CMC was traded, and he had 31 rushing attempts with guys like Blackshear and Chuba Hubbard active for 130 yards and a touchdown against Atlanta. He had 218-plus yard games against the Falcons. I think he had 4 total touchdowns in those 2 matchups. He's got Baltimore this week on the road. It's a tougher matchup, but again, love that they've at least learned enough about themselves to know that this is their best chance to win games, and it's simply limiting the passing attempts and overall margin of error that you have in that passing game. Next up here, the Colts may be able to salvage 2 players as value in fantasy football. Those 2 players are A, Michael Pittman, and B, and much more importantly, Jonathan Taylor. For Jonathan Taylor, they called me a madman. Many called me a madman, they should say. We had him as a buy low candidate last week, the last couple of weeks, as a matter of fact. I continued to have faith to hold out in the hope that he would get healthy and that they would come to their senses and just hand the damn ball off. And lo and behold, is Jeff Saturday an offensive genius? No, I'm not going to even entertain that. But does he at least have the self-awareness to realize that your best offensive player is number 28 in the backfield and your best chance of winning games on third down is to not run play action pass and take deep shots? It's not to try and throw bubble screens. It's not to try and run RPOs and even mess around with the fact that you might pass the ball. It's to hand the damn ball off to Jonathan Taylor and ask him to get first downs. And lo and behold, a guy who had an ankle injury that everyone expected to ruin his season looked extremely healthy after having a great practice schedule this week, being a full participant multiple days. He rips a 66-yard touchdown run down the left sideline, and lo and behold, like I said, a 20-plus point fantasy game. So, not saying that this is going to continue every single week the rest of the season, but it did at least give a lot of encouragement to Jonathan Taylor owners, much like myself, who acquired multiple shares of him this past couple of weeks for dirt cheap prices because Taylor owners were throwing absolute pity party, self-destructive fits. And at the end of the day, if this turns out, it could be one of the biggest heists on the trade market of this fantasy season. So again, do I think he's the RB1 or a top 5 running back? No, not necessarily. I think that he would be happy to be considered a top 12 running back the rest of this year. But when Matt Ryan is in this offense, it is a salvageable unit. Michael Pittman had no value in the self-destructive Sam Ehlinger-led Colts offensive attack. Jonathan Taylor could not help but get absolutely pummeled, and the sample size with Ehlinger was tiny, but there was just no offensive production. The chains were not moving. It was an overall nightmare and disaster, and he goes 22 for $147 and a touchdown with Matt Ryan's first game back as the starter off of barely seeing practice time reportedly, because I guess Sam was taking the starting reps throughout the week for the most part. So I'm happy for the Colts. I'm happy for JT. They freaking beat Josh McDaniels and the Raiders. This will be our most long-winded take of the day, but man, that one felt good. Kadarius Toney here. He is seeing his role in Kansas City grow and evolve. Now, there was a catalyst here. I talked about this in the waiver wire episode. I'm basically giving away the whole waiver wire episode, so I guess you really don't have to check that out. You can if you still want to. We've got more information in there about rostership numbers and why you should pick these guys up and whatnot. But for Kadarius Toney, again, the catalyst was injuries. We saw Juju get hurt in this game. We saw Hardman not even suit up here, and he saw 90 yards from scrimmage on, 6 touches. He had a touchdown as well. Basically, hopped himself into the end zone. It was quite funny. If you haven't seen it, you should go look at it. But for Kadarius, again, I've said this every week since he got acquired. He's explosive, he's twitchy, he can make plays, and he's a creative guy after the catch. So that basically screams usage in the Kansas City Chiefs offense. I like what I see here. Definitely worth a bench stash, and he's considerably a high upside flex play going forward. Next up, let's move into Christian Watson coming off of his coming out party here. An absolutely monstrous performance against Dallas. Now, my takeaway isn't directly just about Christian Watson. It is that I still believe Green Bay and Aaron Rodgers, for that matter, can produce one fantasy relevant wide receiver per week with their current offensive structure. That also can include a running back like Aaron Jones, who also balled out this week. But essentially here, the takeaway is that Aaron Rodgers can provide a high-level game to any of his players, whether it's Samori Toure that week, or Christian Watson, Romeo Doubs, of course, who's injured right now, Alan Lazard. It's tough for them to support two because their passing volume isn't high enough, and as we saw this week, for Christian Watson, that meant scoring a 59 and 39-yard touchdown in addition to a third receiving touchdown on just 4 catches on 8 targets. So you're needing efficiency, you're needing big playmaking over the top. Christian Watson showed he can do that. He's a very good athletic frame, he's got great size, and he can absolutely fly downfield. Love to see him stepping up in this week's matchup. So again, there is some hope for the Packers offense. Of course, not what we expected still heading into this year. Justin Fields, we're going to talk about him again this week. So last week, our takeaway was he is a QB1. He is a very viable starter. This week, the takeaway is he's straight up an elite fantasy quarterback. Others arrived at this conclusion sooner than I did, and he continues to prove that he does not need to have very much passing involvement to get the job done at the end of the day. He only had 167 pass yards. However, he had 147 rush yards on 13 carries, 2 touchdowns, back-to-back weeks with a 60-plus yard touchdown run. The dude's electric and explosive as hell. It's awesome to see. And I was kind of thinking about this, watching the games, kind of, evaluating his talent in terms of what he brings to the table versus what other players do. And what's different from Justin Fields and a Lamar Jackson and a Josh Allen for that matter, he's faster than Josh Allen, and he's bigger than Lamar Jackson. He might not be nearly as shifty as Lamar, but he is dang tough to grab and to tackle and to get on the ground. His athleticism is nearly unmatched for a player of his size in the league, and his size is closer to Josh Allen than it is to Lamar Jackson. Now, he is not nearly as big as Josh Allen, so I'm not delusional in saying that he's a 6'5" behemoth that is just absurd. But what I am saying is that he is a large, thick, physical human being that is a dang terror and nightmare to tackle, and that's what he's been, and he's lightning quick in space, and that's how he's ripping off these touchdowns. He had a touchdown run. He had 2 touchdown runs. His first, the shorter one, he literally, I thought he was dead to rights. He escapes one of the most impossible sacks to break that I've seen recently, and loops around the whole field, and then trucks a guy into the end zone for a touchdown. He's not gonna, I shouldn't say he's not gonna last. He's going to be feeling himself in the morning or feeling the day prior in the morning if he keeps playing that way. But as far as fantasy football is concerned, I don't care because he's putting up close to 40-point weeks on a semi-consistent basis right now. Is that sustainable? No. But what is sustainable for sure is 20-plus point performances. he's got the juice to get that going right now. Ceedee Lamb finally showing his alpha ability this week. My 9th takeaway of week 10. He had his best game of his season. He had the best Cowboys receiver game of the season. First Cowboy in 2022 to have a 100-yard receiving game on 150 yards on 11 catches. 2 scores as well, a season high 15 targets. Again, looks like the alpha right now. Finally, thank you, Ceedee Lamb. It took a close game against the Packers to make that be the case here. However, what I will say is Dallas had a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter. They blew it. And at the end of the day, Ceedee was able to go out there and get this done throughout the contest. It wasn't a late thing. He did have overtime to help him get to that 15 number and did have a catch in overtime. I believe it was about 20 or so yards, maybe more. But again, encouraged by this performance, finally showing us some of that elite ceiling. I believe he is the wide receiver 1 to this point in week 10. I can check in on that super quick here while I get into our next takeaway. I'll try and multitask and talk through both things here. But Amon-Ra St. Brown is back as well. Our last takeaway for today's episode. I've been pounding the desk, talking at you guys, blabbing. Please buy low for Amon-Ra St. Brown after his middling streak of mediocrity since week 2. He's been really struggling to put up solid performances. Actually had 10.5 points in week 3. But basically, he had 10 receptions on 11 targets, a great catch right there, 119 yards, 16 points. Was his first double-digit scoring game since week 3. That 10.5 point performance against Minnesota. So finally kind of getting back over the edge here. I've been saying buy low. In PPR formats, this guy gets so much volume. He will break through and succeed. You just have to wait. He's healthy. I'm not worried about this stuff. He just had to get those passes his way. Had his first 100-yard game of the season since week 2. It's been a long time since we've seen this stuff. Still no touchdowns. Hasn't scored a tutty since that week 2 game. But again, the arrow is pointed upwards, which is what we've been waiting for, and the reason that I've been yelling at you guys to invest into him here going forward. So as I stated with Ceedee Lamb, I got the numbers up for me. He is the wide receiver 1 right now in half PPR with 32.5 points. Christian Watson behind him at 30.7, and Justin Jefferson at 30.3 is your wide receiver 3 for week 10. So one more time, actually, for the first time, haven't said this yet in today's video, I appreciate you guys for sticking with me. I had a lot of fun watching week 10 NFL games. I cannot wait for week 11 here. My Packers have Thursday Night Football this week. We'll be talking fantasy all week long, rankings, must-start players, some last-minute trade advice for the season. We're getting very close, a couple weeks away now. I think December 1st is the kind of prototypical trade deadline, at least for ESPN fantasy leagues this year. That's the date they have set. So we've got a few more weeks of trade content for you guys. I'm very excited about that stuff. Can't wait to send it your way. And I'll see you in a future episode, which will be those trade videos next up tomorrow. Peace out.